This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace.
Last year, I went through many different life changes. I needed to take a pause and examine how I was feeling in the inside to better show up for the ones who need me to be my best version of myself.
When you're navigating life's changes, Talkspace can help. Talkspace is the #1 rated online therapy, bringing you professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatry providers that you can access anytime, anywhere.
Living a busy life, navigating a long-distance relationship, becoming a first-step father, Talkspace made all of those journeys possible. I could speak with my therapist in the office. I could speak with my therapist in the comfort of my home. I was never alone.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance, no problem. Now get $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Nobody brings you better coverage of the teams you're passionate about than these guys.
Try some more.
This is DJ and PK on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. We are joined now by Justin Melo, who covers the NFL and the NFL Draft for Sports Illustrated. Justin, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. Appreciate you for having me. Finally, months of evaluation, months of conversations, lots of lying, lots of smoke screens. It all comes to a head today. Excited to see what happens tonight.
Yeah, we had a guy named Walt Perrin who used to run the NBA draft for the Utah Jazz, and they would make him available every time there's a workout. So we'd only talk to him in like the 6 weeks leading up to the draft, but we'd talk to him 15 times. And he always used to say, the Liars Club is in session. How much do you know what's going to happen today? How much can you dope out the top 10? And how much are you just waiting to see thing? And there's a trade coming that nobody's talking about or that somebody was lying about even if they were asked about it, and this is all going to get scrambled.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting evening. And, this draft is incredibly unpredictable and unique in terms of, where the blue chip talent is, who are the premier prospects, which positions are weaker than others. And I think that's going to lead to very unpredictable results tonight. Sure, we've known for a long time that the Las Vegas Raiders are going to take Fernando Mendoza at #1 overall. After that, I don't know that we know anything. The New York Jets seem to be going back and forth on David Bailey and Arvell Reese. It was initially, it's going to be Arvell Reese, then it was David Bailey. Now it's Arvell Reese again. And now I think it might be Bailey again, actually, based on all the back and forth over this past week. We know they're going to go with one of those pass rushers. The Arizona Cardinals are a real wild card at #3. That's maybe where the draft begins. Do they go with the leftover pass rusher, who doesn't go there at #2? Do they trade the pick? I've spoken to a lot of people who indicate they would love to trade down, and I think that kind of checks out with, Monty Ossenfort, their general manager, and what their needs are. Or does the owner get involved? That owner is kind of known to be a bit of a meddler, and there are some whispers out there that he really likes Jeremiah Love, running back out of Notre Dame. And, why wouldn't he? He sells jerseys. He's probably the best player in the draft. I think they need to put some butts in seats there in Arizona, and I think Jeremiah Love would do that. Certainly don't feel that's the direction that the general manager wants to go in based on all he did at running back this offseason. It's going to be an interesting night, but I think it probably starts at #3.
Since we know Mendoza is going 1, do we have an idea? Do you have an idea that we got to wait till the end of the first round or maybe even the second round before the second quarterback goes?
Absolutely. I'm at the point where it might be crazy to predict this, but I am expecting a team to trade back into the first round for Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson. I think the position is too valuable. It's a weak quarterback class. At times, beginning of the season, especially for Alabama, he played at a pretty high level. Certainly, he was in the mix at #1, we thought, in September, October, based on how he was playing. So the Arizona Cardinals are a big one. In my final mock draft, which published this morning on NFL Draft on SI, if they trade down from 3, which, again, I believe is the general manager's preferred outcome, they would then be acquiring enough capital to make a move back into the first to take Ty Simpson. I think that's where things could get really interesting because right now I believe they're scheduled at 35 or 36. They've got one of those opening picks in the second round. They'd probably have to come up. A team like the Buffalo Bills at 26, from what I understand, are more than willing to move down, even move out of the first round altogether. They're targeting more of a devalued position. The Bills like the linebackers. They like the D tackles. And they're willing to say, hey, we know we can get that guy at 35, 36. We're willing to move back. So certainly the New York Jets are another team. Everyone seems to be ignoring them. They've got 2 second-round picks. They could absolutely be a team that moves back into the first round, for Ty Simpson, if that's the quarterback they covet. So I do anticipate that one of these teams are going to move back up into the opening 32 to get the second quarterback, Alabama's Ty Simpson.
Chiefs have had a great run. They have been awesome. Now they've had a bad year. They get a rare high draft pick at number 9. What do you think Andy Reid wants to add to the team? Because they don't get to draft in the spot very often, and they may not get to draft in a spot like this for a while again after this one.
Yeah, they also have number 29. Remember, they traded cornerback Trent McDuffie and got the 29th pick from the Rams. So they're going into tonight equipped with 2 first-round picks. And I'm told that they could get aggressive. They've explored moves all the way up to number 3. If a pass rusher one of the pass rushers is guaranteed to be there, right? David Bailey or Arvell Reese. I'm told, they've had some discussions about moving up there. I believe they covet one of those players more than the other. So that might depend on who the Jets take at number 2. I also think alternatively that they might be willing to move maybe not that far up, but number 6, a couple picks in front of them, the Cleveland Browns are another team who have explored moving down the board. They covet a left tackle, and they believe they can get a very good one by moving down a couple spots and picking up a few more picks. So Reuben Bain, the edge rusher out of Miami, I think is one of those guys that the Chiefs could target at via a slight trade up. And also Carnell Tate, the wide receiver out of Ohio State, who, the working belief is that if he's there at number 7 for the Washington Commanders, they might sprint that pick to the podium. So if you're a team like Kansas City at 9 and you covet the wideout, and I'm of the opinion that they should. I do not think they had enough weapons for Patrick Mahomes last season. I think they've kind of botched the receiver position in recent off seasons, in all honesty. Now you've got Mahomes coming off a serious injury. You want to make life as easy for him as possible. If they can't get up to 3 for a pass rusher or they deem it to be too rich, don't be surprised if they move up just a couple of spots and target the wide receiver, Carnell Tate.
How about our 2 local guys from Utah along the offensive line? Where do you see them going?
Yeah, I think Spencer Fano, you look at a bunch of teams. I think he'd be in play for the Browns if they stay at 6, but I do think, the Browns are probably going to try to move down and maybe target one of those other tackles. I've got Fano going to the Miami Dolphins at number 11 in my final mock. No bells and whistles there. The Dolphins stay put, let the board fall to them, and pick up who I think is a really good tackle. I know a lot of people talked about him maybe having to move to guard, but I thought he looked outstanding at the NFL Combine. The movement skills to me, and I thought the arm length came in at a pretty decent number, not quite as short as some people feared. So if he can stick and play tackle, I think the Dolphins would have a lot of interest in that at 11, especially with them needing a long-term answer at right tackle. For the other Utah tackle, Caleb Lamu, I've got going in the first round. I don't know that, I think he's a fringe first rounder. That's a borderline thing. I specifically got him going to the Houston Texans. I actually did a really good interview with Caleb the other day that published on NFL Draft on SI just yesterday. So check out that conversation if you haven't yet. I had a real fun time with him. What a good, smart kid. But he flips the switch when he's on the field. A lot tougher and aggressive than he seems from a personality perspective. But I think the Houston Texans, back end of the first round, he told me the San Francisco 49ers hosted him on a pre-draft top 30 visit. So I think there are a couple teams that might target him, in that 28 to 32 range.
I'm really intrigued by the Giants for multiple reasons. The AFC West got really good. I mean, the Chiefs were on their great run. And then both the Chargers and the Broncos went out and got established coaches who'd won before and been really good. And sure enough, the Broncos and Chargers have made back-to-back playoff appearances. Now, we're old enough to remember a day when the NFC East was just fantastic, and it has not been fantastic lately. But if Philly can stay good, Washington can have a bounce-back year. They're down last year. The injuries were a factor. And the Giants, who've been wandering for a while, bringing in John Harbaugh, to me it kind of fits what his brother did with the Chargers and what Sean Payton has done with the Broncos. And they got the 5th and the 10th pick. They got a young quarterback and a young running back. What do you think they do? Because I've been stunned to hear about their interest in Jeremiah Love. I mean, obviously he's an awesome talent, but they've already got a back. It seems like they'd have other needs. What do you think they do?
Yeah, I think they're going to prioritize weapons in the trenches. At number 5, I think one of the easier projections, assuming Love, isn't on the board. If he is, things might get a little complicated. But I think the Giants go Sonny Styles, the linebacker out of Ohio State at 5. Harbaugh had a lot of great linebackers throughout his time at Baltimore, that really impacted the game. Obviously, even guys like Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, guys who made a difference. I think they're going to target Sonny Styles there. Elite athlete, right? Freakish numbers at the NFL Combine, set records, vertical jump and broad jump for his position group. And we talk about that position being devalued, but you look at what he does on tape, the way that he uses his length and his range to clog up passing lanes, all the rage in today's NFL in terms of offense and the way they pass the football has kind of become targeting the middle of the field. You look at the way that Sonny Styles defends the middle of the field, I think he's a big, big asset. At number 10, things get interesting there. I think they could go a number of ways. I look at Vega Aone, the guard out of Penn State. I think he would solidify a huge hole for them, help protect a quarterback who's, was injury prone throughout his rookie season. I look at Jordan Tyson. There's been a lot of smoke connecting them to the Arizona State receiver. Certainly that pick would be an investment not only in Jackson Dart, of course, in his development, but it would also protect them a little bit as, their number one receiver, Malik Neighbors, is coming off a devastating season-ending injury. And remember, they lost Wendell Robinson in free agency. So there's a need there, opposite Neighbors at receiver. One possibility that I can't shake if they do end up taking Sonny Styles at 5. Now, I do predict that they'll take the receiver at 10. But what if Caleb Downs, the Ohio State safety, is still on the board? Do they even consider the possibility, if they get Styles or even Arvell Reese, let's say at 5, do they think about reuniting Caleb Downs with one of those Ohio State teammates? He's one of the best players in the draft. I think he's probably the second best player in the draft, in all honesty. But we are expecting him to slide a little bit due to the nature of playing a devalued position at safety. If Caleb Downs is there, I'd have to think that'd be pretty tempting, maybe to reunite him with one of his teammates. The one catch, the reason I can't get myself all the way there is I'd be a little surprised if they spent both of their picks, 5 and 10, on defense and kind of neglected, the quarterback and the development that he needs to undergo.
Using the Cardinals as an example, where do you stand in terms of best player available versus needs? Because in football, every team has some needs, and maybe you only get to draft this great player one opportunity, and you might have to wait several years.
Yeah, the Cardinals are actually a really interesting example because we've heard the smoke about them, I alluded to earlier, potentially with the owner getting involved and maybe taking Jeremiah Love at number 3. I don't, I think they've probably got to I don't think they're in a position to do that, right? Like, you look at this roster, they don't have a quarterback. They've got, right tackle's a huge hole. I mean, I think ideally they would love to trade down and get a guy that I think they'd consider at number 3, and that's Miami Hurricanes offensive tackle Francis Mahinoa. I think there's a strong possibility that would be sort of a plug-and-play player for them. They do not have a right tackle on the roster right now. They've got a first-year offensive-minded head coach in Mike LaFleur. The Cardinals, it's a great question because, even pass rusher at 3, I mean, that probably marries need with best player available if they get stuck in that spot and can't trade down. But they've drafted a lot of pass rushers in recent years. Darius Robinson in the first round. They took a second rounder a couple years ago out of LSU. They signed Josh Sweat to a big contract in free agency. They're in a fascinating position, because chances are the best player available is going to be the running back. I don't, they restructured James Conner. They signed Tyler Algier in free agency. They have Trey Benson. They drafted highly a couple of years ago. I do not think they should take a running back there at number 3. They should probably try to find a way to marry need with, the second or third best player available, let's call it. But I think ideally they'd love to trade down and pick up a tackle because they desperately need someone to be plug and play on the right side.
You've obviously spent a lot of time trying to figure out this NFL draft, and the NFL team spent a lot of money and time trying to figure it out. And then Puka Nacua slides to the 5th round and has over 4,000 yards receiving in 3 years. Is there anybody out there you've come across who think, I really like this player. I know he's not going day 1. I'm not even sure he's going day 2, but he's going to be a really good pro.
Yeah, there are a couple receivers I like. And, one who I don't think has that upside, but I really, really like is Jeremy Bernard, the wide receiver out of Alabama. I wrote an article yesterday on SI, the most pro-ready prospects at every position in the draft. And I chose him as the wide receiver who's the most pro-ready. Ahead of all these, we like at 6 receivers in the 1st round. None of them are going to be Jeremy Bernard. None of them are as pro-ready as he is. You watch him on tape. He's the savviest, smartest route runner in this class. Might lack the high-end athletic tools needed, to be a true dominant wide receiver 1. But I think he's going to be a big-time QB-friendly wide receiver 2. All he does, if you can keep his evaluation as simple as it gets, is that he gets open and catches the football. He identifies soft zones in zone coverage, able to exploit defenses, really smart, really good football player, can run a full route tree. I really, really like Bernard out of Alabama, and I think he should go in the 2nd round. But I could talk your ear off all day. I think there are a lot of prospects. Skylar Bell is a really underrated receiver out of UConn, caught 95 balls this past year for 1,300 yards, 10-plus touchdowns. I really like Charles Demings, the cornerback out of Stephen F. Austin. I think he's going to be a big-time steal. Keelan Rutledge, the guard out of Georgia Tech. No one's going to – you asked about a receiver. No one's going to bring up a guard typically, but I really like Keelan Rutledge out of Georgia Tech. I think he's going to be plug-and-play. This draft certainly lacks premier blue-chip talent at premier positions, but I think there's going to be a lot of value found specifically at, wide receiver, the interior of the offensive line, cornerback, safety, linebacker. Some really good value on day 2 and 3.
Well, that is a lot of info. Enjoy tonight, and let's see if there's a couple of big trades that scramble everything and send all the predictions flying all over the place. A couple unpredictable teams moving up. Who knows, right?
Absolutely. Appreciate you for having me. Enjoy tonight. You gentlemen know where to find me.
Thank you, Justin. Justin Melo writes for Sports Illustrated, covers the NFL and the NFL draft.